Hello, and welcome back to MacroBasics for the second video of this series. Was the long overdue video, really. I know I promised that I'd be putting one of these videos up every week, and I do apologise for not sticking to the schedule. I've been busy with various university things, work-related stuff, essentially. But yes, anyway, I'm back with the series, so hopefully you guys are happy to see it back. If you do, please drop a like and subscribe. But anyway, moving on from that administrative part of the video, we'll get into sort of the meat of what we're talking about today. So, today we're talking about ADAS, and we're going to be focusing on aggregate demand mostly in this video. In the next video, we'll be focusing on aggregate supply, because I think you can put so much detail into both that if I was to do both in one video, I'd be sitting here for 20 minutes plus talking about ADAS, and I know economics can be dry for a lot of people, so sitting through a 20-minute plus video on pure econ would probably get quite tiresome, so I'll try and keep this video quite short by focusing on just AD today. We'll brush on AS a little bit, but we'll go on to the details for that in the next video. So yes, here is your ADAS diagram. A rather poor one, I must admit. I know when I was doing A-level, if I produced a diagram like this, they would probably kill me, because we have a lack of labelling, say APL here, and then Q here, or Q star and APL star, because this is the equilibrium within the economy at this point, within the snapshot of time, because remember this is a diagram showing a snapshot. But yes, anyway, it serves the purposes of this video for what we're talking about. So, on the y-axis we have the average price level. We'll discuss about what that is in a minute. On the x-axis we have real GDP. We then have two curves. We have aggregate supply sloping upwards, and then aggregate demand sloping downwards. So, average price level is essentially the average price of all goods and services within the economy. So, I guess you could refer to this as sort of, when you're increasing AD, you're sort of showing inflationary pressure within the economy by showing shifts in average price level along the y-axis. Then, obviously, we've got real GDP, which you guys will probably all know about. And then we've got, as I said, these two curves here, AS and AD. As you can probably guess, the reason AD slopes downwards is average price level decreases within the economy. The amount of goods and services demanded will increase. So this is why your real GDP will increase, because the amount of goods and services is increasing, essentially. Well, demanded anyway. And then AS, obviously, suppliers within an economy will supply more at a higher price point. And this is a general rule of thumb. This is, obviously you can get more complex diagrams than this, but as I said, this will serve the purposes of this video. So, as I said, we'll be focusing on aggregate demand today, this curve. And I guess we should start with what aggregate demand actually is. So, aggregate demand consists of four components. You have consumption, investment, government investment, and then in addition to that you have net exports. So we'll briefly discuss each of those. Consumption. Pretty self-explanatory, this one. Consumption is essentially what households buy or consume. So what we consume, essentially, what our parents consume, and what have you. As I then said, you have investment. So investment, this is businesses, so this could be domestic or foreign firms investing. So whether that be into local infrastructure or investing into expanding their presence within an economy, so they're hiring more people and other things like that. I'll do a more in-depth video on each of these, I think, because you can probably do a mini video on each one. Then you've got government investments. So obviously what the government's investing, so what they invest into, say, healthcare, education, other public services. And then the last component is net exports, which for a lot of economies will be negative. This will be a negative value because, to make this clear, your AD is essentially an addition, is a sum of all these things. So AD is equal to consumption plus investment plus government investment plus net exports. So in a lot of cases, your net exports will be negative. So obviously you just apply that to the equation, because a lot of countries will have a negative, essentially trade balance. They will be importing a higher value than they're exporting. In most cases, this is not for every country, but for most cases, this is accurate. So, how do you go about increasing AD? Well, as I said, within the equation, you have the government. So the government is responsible for fiscal policy. And then you also have monetary policy, which in a lot of countries is the responsibility of the central bank. Now, the central bank isn't always independent of the government. It depends where it is. So in the UK, we have an independent central bank. In other countries, you won't. So the government essentially will tell what the central bank to do. Although it is usually in the best interest, even within an independent, where you have an independent setup, that the central bank and the government are working and communicating with each other, because you don't want your monetary policy contradicting your fiscal policy. Otherwise, you could have sort of a cancelling out effect. So, fiscal policy. What can the government do to boost AD? So, obviously, you have some pretty obvious ones. You can decrease income tax. So, say you decrease income tax, let's say from 20 to 17% for the normal brackets, then obviously you would see AD increase because you would expect consumption to increase. This is where it can get more complex, because you can then go into the propensity to save and consume, and we'll cover that in a future video. But for the purposes of this video, we'll just assume that decreasing income tax will result in consumption increasing. So, as a result, you're basically make one component of that equation we just talked about bigger, so your AD will become bigger, it will increase. Other things that the government can do, the government could decrease corporation tax, which is obviously good for not government. Can't get my words out today. Business investment. So if you're decreasing corporation tax, this is good because they can hire more people. It might encourage foreign firms to set up bases in your own economy, because if you have a competitive corporation tax in comparison with other countries, then those foreign firms are more likely to set up a base in your country rather than in another economy. Then other things that the government can do besides tax rates, you have things and methods like grants. So even for, say, education, so people can consume high levels of education through grants, because education is a service. Higher education is a private service within the UK anyway. So you want people consuming that. You're boosting the consumption there. And there's a number of other fiscal policies the government can use, which I'll discuss in a later video, because fiscal policy is a very broad subject that deserves its own explanation, its own video. And then we've also got monetary policy, which is what the central bank can do. So there's two tools that the central bank has. You have interest rates, and you have quantitative easing / tightening. For the purposes of this video, we'll just be talking about easing because we're trying to boost aggregate demand. So, what is quantitative easing? Quantitative easing is where the central bank will buy high quality assets from commercial banks in order to release funds into the financial system, which in theory should mean those commercial banks will loan out more to businesses and consumers. And obviously this boosts business investment and consumption, which is good for AD. This isn't always the case, because not all the money that those commercial banks get will be then passed on to the economy. But that's for another video where we talk about the benefits and the drawbacks of quantitative easing. And then we have interest rates. So obviously when you decrease interest rates, or if you decrease the base rate, the cost of borrowing decreases. So you have a drop in interest rates. Your cost of so first of all, the base rate will mean that banks can lend to each other at a cheaper rate. The interbanking lending rate decreases, so that means they can also pass it on to consumers in lower interest rates, which means consumers will save less and spend more, because why would you save more money if your interest rate is decreased? The advantages of saving, your marginal propensity to save decreases, and your marginal propensity to consume increases, because there's more incentive to consume than there is to save, because you can borrow more to consume various goods and services. So yeah, so that's what in essence, the central bank can do. So we've covered what the central bank can do, what the government can do, the components of AD. Finally, I'm just going to touch on why increasing AD might be a bad idea. So, as you can see from the diagram, boosting AD from here to here does cause an increase in average price level. Now, a moderate increase is fine. Moderate inflation is good for the economy. But we don't want excessive, uncontrollable inflation. Just look at Germany in the 20s, look at Zimbabwe in 2008, I think. I'll link articles to these various events so you can have a read for yourself. And then obviously in the modern day we have Venezuela and its various economic problems, beyond its political problems, obviously. But yeah, so if you're boosting AD too much, then, especially according to the neoclassical school of thought, where you in this diagram you'd essentially add a long-run aggregate supply, and this would become SRAS, a short-run aggregate supply, and SRAD, short-run aggregate demand. So you'd basically put an inelastic curve here. So what would happen is you would boost AD, so you'd be going from point A to point B. So in the short run, you're increasing real GDP from here to here, whilst also causing some inflationary pressure. But it's fine because you're generating some additional real GDP. In the long run, though, your real GDP would return back to here along your RAS curve. So you've had no gain in real GDP, but you have caused a load of inflation, which is not good for the economy, because high inflation undermines consumer and business confidence, and you don't want that for an economy, a healthy economy, essentially. But yeah, so that's essentially sort of a short video on aggregate demand and the ADAS diagram. If there's anything I've missed, then please feel free to put something in the comments, ask questions, or to correct me. I'll put articles or explanations, articles explaining ADAS that might do a better job of explaining it than me in the description, so feel free to check those out. But yes, anyway, thank you for watching, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.